curve on infections and let the medical profession get ahead of the buildup of needed supplies, beds, masks, and ventilators that actually worked in 90% of the country. Where things did get ugly, we saw something unbelievable. Cynical New Yorkers actually stopped to take a minute every day to salute the medical profession for something they do all day, every day without recognition, i.e. risk their lives by facing down infectious disease in hospitals. Then perhaps the most unbelievable thing of all, the IRS let everybody off the hook on April 15th tax payments, proving that the unholy duo of death and taxes, only one of them is truly certain, and that is death. Then the Internal Revenue Service actually became a revenue service and sent checks out to everybody who makes less than 200 grand a year, no strings attached. But of all the unprecedented things that have happened, to me, the most amazing thing is that most of the states that have legalized cannabis in the past 20 years declared it an essential service and never required cannabis stores to close down, even while closing down every other type of retailer except food, drug, and banks. So that's some fine company to be in. In Colorado, one town even closed down the liquor stores, but kept the cannabis stores open. So this caps off a 20-teens decade in which cannabis went from illegal to essential. So what happened when that happened? Let's see if I can make this advance. There we go. So here's the timeline of how it all went down. The actual pandemic was declared on March 11th, but it really predates that. Probably arrived in California in December, maybe, with one of the 8,000 Chinese that fly into California airports every day, or maybe before that, actually, depending on how badly the Beijing government is still lying to us about when this all began in Wuhan. But for cannabis, the first big event was Colorado and Canada and California leading the way, as they often have in this industry, by first of all declaring their shelter-in-place orders in mid-March, but then immediately declaring that cannabis stores were essential services and could stay open. And then things got even better for cannabis stores when checks from the IRS started arriving just in time for the traditional 420 National Cannabis Holiday. Of course, things are kind of different for the cannabis industry than all other industries anyway. Most consumer products grow at 3 to 5% a year. You get a 1% growth from the population increasing and 2 to 5 points from inflation. Cannabis, in contrast, just finished a period in which it grew at a remarkable 34% a year, actually quintupling over 6 years since 2013, when it was all medical. We think the overall market, including both adult use and medical use, will now triple from 15 to 45 billion plus in the next 6 years. And on top of that, there will be many, many more years of double-digit growth ahead as the rest of the states and then the rest of the countries around the world legalize cannabis. My company, BDSA, tracks retail transactions at hundreds of dispensaries around the country. We now have 8 tracked, and we have 6 in which we have year-over-year comparisons where we've been able to take a look at what happened in March. So despite all those events in March of this year, we saw stupendous growth, actually, in most states. Incredible in Maryland, where they went from 50 to 90 dispensaries during that time period and grew revenues by 80%. Nevada, of course, took a hit, as would be expected when millions of tourists suddenly disappear from the Vegas Strip. But everybody else saw growth. So really, the existing markets are generally taking the COVID-19 quarantines in stride. Oregon just posted record April revenue, it reports. And of course, things have gotten better in other ways too. Suddenly, states that were not allowing delivery services or curbside pickup and internet ordering are now allowing all of those things because they make perfect sense in a in a quarantine situation. We're seeing some very interesting sub-trends, more medical gains than adult use gains. Of course, the medical consumer is the big consumer for the most part, and the risk of losing access, of course, really motivated them to get into stores in a big way. We're seeing benefits across all the product categories, mostly just in raw flower as a product category, though, because it's the perfect stock up emergency ration kind of thing to buy. So it's going to be very interesting as shelter in place orders are now lifted to see how things develop further on a state by state basis. What's really happened is a stock up phenomenon, we thought initially, but it hasn't gone away, suggesting that with everybody at home and stimulus checks in hands and not much else to do, people are just consuming more cannabis. So there's fewer visits, but bigger tickets being written at each visit on average. So this confirms that we're probably likely to see cannabis now become the fastest growing product category in the history of modern commerce. The broadband internet actually grew at 29% a year after it got to $5 billion back in the late 1990s. But if things continue on this kind of path now, we're talking about a 32% compound annual growth rate for the cannabis industry, making it the fastest growing industry of all time. So there's been some downside, of course. A bunch of states were on track to legalize either medical or adult use this year. Now it looks like just New Jersey, Arizona, and of all places, South Dakota will legalize this year. But long term, we expect that there will actually be more legalization because of COVID-19. States are cash strapped and need the money. So it's an interesting time where we're finally seeing something we couldn't have believed would happen. Haircuts are illegal, cannabis is legal, and 50 years on, the hippies have won. Thank you, Madam Toastmaster.
Wow. Well, thank you for that informative speech. I wanted to talk to my investor or my husband about what money we have with the markets being so bad. And it's buy low, sell high. And low is not going to last very long with the cannabis industry.
Be brave.
Yeah.
Nice.
So